Alright, hello everyone, and today I'm just going to be giving you guys like a basic outline on what profile service is and how you can use it to code on Roblox. So basically, profile service is basically a data store um, module that was created by Mad Studio Roblox, and it basically makes saving data and loading data a lot easier to use for Roblox developers. Um, the regular data store is very limited in providing like session locking, for example. And so many Roblox developers I've talked to and on the platform have really recommend using Profile Service because of how easy it is to use, how easy it is to update data and save data um, pretty much automatically. So you probably already know this, and so let's go into like how we can basically use it. And so basically, you can have a basic, sorry, you can have like a basic data template inside a table or a module, and you're just gonna load this in into like a variable or something like that in this script for the basic usage. If you go to the API for profile service, you can just look at it and it says local profile template equals the default data template, right? And so you're actually going to load the profile service because it will be a module. This will just be the directory of the profile service. And so we're just saving that into the variable profile service, and we're getting the service players. And then here is where we create the data store. So in the regular data store, you would probably have used like data store, get data store. Data store service, get data store, in the strings, the data store. But here, when you use profile service, you're just saying profile service get profile store, and this is the same exact thing. It's just getting the specific data store that you want. So in this case, we want to get the player data store, and the profile template is going to be the second parameter, basically, which is the default data template for like a new player. So for example, if I join the game, right, my default data template would be cash equals 0, items being equal to an empty table, and login times being 0. If this profile template was not there, my data would simply just be this table. It'd just be an empty table. And so that is how you actually create a data store with profile service. And now we're creating a local variable called profiles, and we're setting it equal to a table, and we're just basically going to save player profiles as they join the game into this table. And so we have a function called give cache, do something with loaded profile, and a player added function. So I'm just going to skip those for now and go to the bottom where we're connecting and initializing. And so basically, when we get to the bottom, we basically say for any player that's in the game, we're just going to run the player added function. And in the player added function, you can see that we're getting the player's profile. So we're saying profile store. If you remember, profile store was our data store, right? And we're saying profile store load profile async player.user ID. Now this is the key for the specific player's data we would like to load from this data store, from the player data store, right? And so that profile is going to include the data to the player data, basically. The player that loaded into the game. And you know it's the player's data specifically because we're indexing this key with the specific player.user ID. And since user IDs are unique to every single player, you're going to be able to basically sync the player's profile specifically to that player's user ID. And basically, we're saying if the profile doesn't exist, if the profile exists, I'm sorry, we're saying if the profile exists by saying if it's not equal to nil, then we want to basically add the user ID. And this is just for GDPR compliance. Like, let's say a user wanted to delete their account and their data. That's how you would be able to comply with that. And profile reconcile, we call this just in case we wanna the player's data has missing variables from an update, for example. Let's say I'm on update, like I created this data store template, cache items and login times. Let's say I changed this so that I actually added another variable called um, bunnies, for example, and bunnies was equal to 5, right? Or let's just say 0. Then basically what would happen is that if we call reconcile, it's going to add that new data store variable that we added to our table, which is basically reconciling it so that we can basically make any changes across time on our data template the same for all players no matter when they join the game. So that's just what this function does. Profile listen to release basically listens to when you release the profile. And what that means is when you want to stop the profile service from saving, when most likely when the player leaves the game, you're just going to call profile release as we see here. But we're going to get to that. So when the profile release, we're going to remove the player's profile from the profiles variable that we created here that's keeping track of all the players' profiles. If the player is still in the game after we loaded the player's data and we updated it and we listened to the release, we want to do something with the profile. We're going to call this function do something with the loaded profile. We're going to pass in player and profile as arguments. The player and their profile. If they're not still in the game, that's when we want to release the profile. We want to stop the profile from saving data. And if you remember me talking about session locking in the beginning of the video, this basically releases the session lock for the player. So let's say, for those of you who don't know what session locking is, right? Basically, without session locking, people would be able to do things like create multiple trades when they leave a game and rejoin. Because they would be able to like duplicate items and things like that. And so session locking basically allows a player not to be able to do anything with their data if their data is still like being handled on another server or something like that. And that's basically um, what session locking is. And it just locks the player data so that it cannot be like tricked kind of when it, or like not tricked, but it can't be used before like it got saved from another server. So if the profile is not saved, right, or if the profile doesn't exist, then that's when we just want to kick the player because their profile doesn't even exist, so we don't have to release it. And so we're going to do something with the player's profile now. And as we can see, we have the player and profile as parameters. We want to access the data login times, and we want to add 1 to it. So the way you would access that is you would access the data of the profile and the name of the specific data you want to access. So here it's login time. So we just type in login times and we just increment it by 1, right? And we just print player name has logged in, and we print the login time, and then we say if it's greater than 1, add an S at the end. If it's not, just an empty string. And so it should say, if this is your first time joining the game, player name has logged in 1 time without the S, because 1 is not greater than 1. And then we're going to give cache, which is another function here, which we'll get into. And then we'll print player.name owns the cache variable now, right? And so if you just go in the game, right, we're going to give you cache, which should be 0. And that's going to be the amount here, 100, as the parameter. And so it says if the profile.data.cache is equal to nil, and this what's basically saying is if the cache was not defined in the profile template in the beginning, we're going to basically create it. We're going to say this is how you basically create a data table. This is how you create data that is not inside of the data table. They use cache, but cache already exists. For this example, I think it would have been better if they used another variable to show how it literally didn't exist. But imagine this was a different variable, because in this case, it does exist. Cache does exist. And so they just wanted to show how you could create variables that weren't inside the data template. So not everything you would like to save has to be in the data template when you load player's profile. You can add to the data template or the player's data without it having necessarily to be inside the template. And so what you're doing is you're just basically saying profile.data.cache, so the player's cache is incremented by the amount, in this case 100. So a new player would have 100. So it's a player.name, print player.name owns 100 now. And then when we get down to our connections, we're just connecting the player added function to any player that joins the game. And for any player that gets removed from the game, we're just going to release their profile if their profile exists. And so everyone, thank you for watching the video. That's just a basic profile service overview. You can be able to code with profile with just basically this knowledge. Like you just need to know how to mutate the data, how to load in the data, and how to stop the data from saving and being able to release the session log. And so this is a basic overview of profile service, and thank you for watching.